Here today because it is unbelievably 21 years since the Bush-Cheney regime set up a prison outside the law in Cuba known as Guantanamo, where they locked up 779 men over these 20-some years. For what reason? To show the rest of the world that they were in charge and could hold people with no charges, no redress, no due process for all of these years. And indeed, 35 men are still in Guantanamo. Many, many people around the world have those men in their hearts, and we do too. Many, many people in the United States think Guantanamo is so yesterday. Is it even still open? Didn't they close it? I thought Obama closed it. Wait a minute. Biden says he's going to close it. What the heck is going on? It's 21 years, and we are demanding that prison, that torture camp set up by the United States be closed immediately, and that those men who are still held without charge, who were tortured, receive justice, and that all those men who were freed and thrown around the world in all directions without support, most importantly, without even a damn apology for what was done to them, being held with no charges. We are out here today to say they deserve the support and the justice they never received. And we're not just demanding it from the government. We're saying today, the Guantanamo Support Fund it is our goal to raise $1,000 today, right here, to support those men who have been sent around the world to Serbia, all kinds of countries where they knew no one and were stuck because some country got talked into accepting them under pressure by the United States, because that's what happened. There are so many stories, and we have people here today to show these stories. I do want to highlight and call out the 20 men that are in Guantanamo today, having been promised they would be released, some as long ago as when Obama was in charge. They're still there. Even that is a screaming injustice. And so we are joining with people all over the globe today to raise the same demand. Close Guantanamo now! Close Guantanamo now! Close Guantanamo now! Guantanamo now! And justice for those unjustly detained. My name is Deborah Sweet. I'm with World Can't Wait, and friends are here from at least 15 other organizations. Oh, such a long list of people who care about justice. And we have people here who are going to be able to present to you a lot of important information that none of us knows the whole picture, but they really understand what's going on. And we have wonderful performers here to share and raise our spirits and make us feel what it is to be human and to care about humanity and to work for more justice in the world. Before our first speaker comes up, I just want to welcome the Raging Grannies, the young ladies who sing for us. Come on up. We're going to start with the song, Why Are We All Silent? Oh, we're going to sing the Prison Industrial Complex.
Live mics? Yes, they are. Grannies? Come on, come on, come on, come on. Just work it. Ready? Prison Industrial Complex. Prison Industrial Complex. Written by Alice Sutter. 1, 2, 3. From the halls of Rikers Island to Guantanamo's SA Special Housing Unit, we are locking down the people. We can make some room for you. Folks of color, Muslims, immigrants, now more activists are next. We keep our corporations rich, the prison industrial complex. We can cage you without charges, like Guantanamo detainees. No parole for political prisoners who stood up for what you believe. We round up hard-working immigrants and we send them far away. And we trump up terrorist charges to lock up Muslims every day. We send city kids to upstate jails, friends and family far away. We can beat them when we're in the mood, make them work for crappy pay. Oh, we raid the homes of activists, hope to throw them in the pen. But we'll keep big bankers free and rich so they can rob you once again. From the cells of Rikers Island to Guantanamo's SHU, we are locking down the people. We can make some room for you. Folks of color, Muslims, immigrants, now more activists are next. We keep our corporations rich, the prison industrial complex. A word from our corporate sponsors.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We're the Raging Grannies of New York City. Run away, run away.
Are we going to sing another song? No, just next time. Oh.
So with the Raging Grannies, I think the rage part is more key than the granny part. And I appreciate that. Again, Guantanamo was opened 21 years ago today during the U.S. War on Terror, which many of us call the War of Terror, producing 4 million casualties across the Middle East. And yes, many thousands of people in the U.S. suffered very directly from this war as well, either with grievous injuries, long-lasting complications from serving in the War on Terror, and death. And it's all a war crime. But this torture and this refinement of learning how to torture was a real contribution of the Bush-Cheney regime, and further developed actually by the last 3 presidents, because they failed to address it and stop it. I'm going to call up a New York City attorney who many of you know as the force behind the Talking Dog blog. He knows a lot about Guantanamo and about those brave attorneys who have defended the men at Guantanamo. And here's the Talking Dog himself.
Thank you, Deborah. It's January 11th, 2023. Guantanamo has now been opened to hold Muslim men and boys prisoner now for 21 years. I suppose it can drink now. Maybe in 4 years it can rent a car. But let's let that sink in a moment. When Guantanamo opened, I was 39. I just turned 60. My daughter was 2. She's now 23. And that's kind of the point. An entire generation has grown up not knowing a world without Guantanamo. You can do your own math. When we met here last year, unfortunately, we noted that the Biden administration had improved on the Trump administration's abysmal record of releasing a single prisoner by releasing a single prisoner. So it was up to 2. Now, after 2 years, the administration has released 5. So 35 men remain. One of the 20 men cleared for transfer is my friend Candace Gorman's client, Saeed Bakoush from Algeria. 1 year ago today, he had his periodic review board hearing because the Pentagon has a sense of humor and held it on the anniversary. He was cleared for release, which seems to mean a great deal because he's still there with no particular assurance of when or whether he or any of the other 34 men held at Guantanamo will be released. Even if he is sent home or to a third country, he or the other prisoners will be subjected to restrictions on their movement and activities that former detainee Mansour Adaifi called Guantanamo 2.0. Almost all the rest are subject to never-ending. So those are the 20 prisoners cleared for transfer. Most of the rest are subject to military commissions that were designed to find them guilty. Kangaroo courts that have failed to bring anyone to justice in an effort to get around the United States' foray into torturing prisoners and then trying to use tortured confessions as evidence. The commissions process has been an epic fail. On this day a year ago, a working group of legal experts at the University of Pennsylvania, led by my law school classmate, Harvey Rishikoff, former convening authority, the official responsible for military commissions, issued a group of 13 recommendations to close Guantanamo. That list looked very similar to a group of recommendations made by our friends Tom Wilner and Andy Worthington. Of course, it's been 14 years since my college classmate Barack Obama issued an executive order calling for Guantanamo's closure. Guantanamo, however, still seems to be open. Tom Wilner's college classmate, George W. Bush, said that he intended to close Guantanamo, but it still appears to be open. Unfortunately, I hate to break this, but thus far it seems that the only president who's dealt with Guantanamo honestly has been Donald Trump, who said that he actually intended to keep it open forever. The others, unfortunately, their words didn't exactly match their deeds, and it's still open. To his credit, as I said, the Biden administration has released 5 people. It's appointed officials responsible for closing. It's cleared prisoners for release. But despite that, we're still here. Guantanamo remains open because it fits neatly into the context of the American military project. We are holding human war trophies, and we are holding them because they are members of a group, Muslims, that are easily demonized after decades of priming for Islamophobia. So, despite what Barack said, this is not who we are, it appears that this is exactly who we are. At this point, appealing to the empire on its own terms, because Guantanamo is useful for potential terrorists as a symbol, because it is contrary to our values, or because it's outrageously expensive. It costs hundreds of millions of dollars a year to house 35 men at this point, but we keep saying it. Well, we've tried these arguments, and they've never worked. So at this point, let me say this. We're going to appeal to the empire on our terms. We aren't going to let go of this outrage until it is closed down once and for all. So say it with me. Close Guantanamo now! Thank you. Guantanamo now.
Close Guantanamo now.
There's two things that we're asking everybody attending to do while you're here. There's a poster that's going around the world, the number of days that Guantanamo has been open. 7,671 days. We're asking everyone here to have their picture taken with this poster, to join the thousands of people around the rest of the world that are largely ahead of us in understanding that all people have humanity. And we have a professional photographer right here named Don. Raise your hand, Don. He's looking for more people to photograph before the light leaves us. So please get over to Don and have your photo taken. The second thing is, the photos are going online under the hashtag Close Guantanamo all over the world on the social media. The second thing is, these men that have been cast over the whole world with no support after having been held unjustly in Guantanamo for some decades need our support. They need our friendship, our justice, and they actually need concrete support for things like tuition, childcare, rent, materials, computers, things that they were deprived of for so long. So we want to raise $1,000 today right here for the Guantanamo Support Survivors Fund. Here's the QR code. You can bring cash up here to these buckets. You can find a way to give and share with other people. Thank you. Next, I'd like to bring up one of the hundreds. Let's acknowledge the hundreds of attorneys who stepped forward to defend people in Guantanamo over the years, who really did this for no money, to serve and serve humanity and fight for justice. A lot of that work was led by the Center for Constitutional Rights, who bravely fought the government to even get the right for these prisoners to have legal support. And we're very fortunate to have one of our longtime friends, Pardis Kebriai, who serves as a senior attorney at the Center for Constitutional Rights. So please welcome her.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Deborah. I'm Pardis. Like Deborah said, I'm an attorney at the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York. We're a small but strong civil rights group that have been around since the 60s, based here. We've been involved in Guantanamo since the beginning, since 2002. I got involved in 2007, right before Obama, when I thought maybe I would just have a year or two left working as a Guantanamo attorney because President-elect Obama was saying he was going to close the prison. I really did think I was going to be out of a job in a few years, and here we are, 21 years later. I represent a man who is still there. He's been there since the beginning, without charge. His name is Shakawi El-Haj. He's from Yemen. He's in his late 40s. He has a family that is waiting for him. He is cleared for release, and yet he's sitting in his cell as we stand here now. But what I am actually feeling and what I want to do is reflect a little bit more on the distance we've come, which is not usually where I'm thinking. But I'm feeling a lot of gratitude to all of you here today. I haven't seen you in years since COVID. We haven't really been able to gather like this. And it's amazing and really life-giving to see friends and allies who've been fighting for over 2 decades, who've been here every year, who have written the names of people who've been there, people who've died. It's remarkable. It's been a remarkable domestic and international movement, and it has mattered. This prison held nearly 800 people at its peak. It is down to 35 people. Yes, there is a lot of work to do, and those who've been released still live in a kind of prison, many of them, because they are without family, they're without support, they're without treatment. There's been no accountability, and that's why you should donate to this fund. But that said, it is remarkable that we're down to 35 people. That is not the way prisons usually go. So I just want to acknowledge that and thank you for that. And thank you from Sharkawi and our clients and the men who are still inside and who've been released. Your presence and your energy has mattered. And I think the biggest challenge for us now is to keep at it, to keep our faith, our hope, our anger, our outrage, our passion, and to keep at this for what is left. So thank you, just thank you. What is left is, we are on the same page with the administration. They want to close the prison. Yes, there are legal issues. I'm a lawyer. I could talk about the legal issues, holding people indefinitely for 20 years. And what that means is without charge. And what without charge means is without reason, without good reason. People have been held for over 2 decades. That's illegal. It's wrong. It's morally an outrage, all of that. But as a policy and practical matter, we're on the same page with the administration, and Gitmo can close. The people who are left can be transferred. As has been said, the majority of people who are being held are without charge. They're people who will never be charged. 20 of them are cleared for release. What that means is that the government itself has looked at its own information about who it is holding, and everyone with a stake in these detentions has decided that continuing to detain these people is not necessary. It is not necessary for security for the United States. They can be released, and it's a matter of finding countries for them to go to. So that's where we are in terms of our work. We're working with the government. We're trying to keep the pressure on the administration to not let up and to continue searching for countries for people to be transferred to. And then, of course, there's a whole another chapter of supporting people in their resettlement and in their reentry. But Guantanamo can be closed, and it's largely a practical matter. And for those of us here today, it's a matter of continuing to keep our energy up. It is hard work. It's exhausting. It's upsetting. There are myriad crises going on in the world right now, as we know. If you're looking at the prison population, 35 is obviously what it is in the context of U.S. mass incarceration. But this would be one less source of pain on the map of the world if it were to close. It should be closed. It has to close, and we can and will get there. So thank you again, and I hope not to see you next year.
Thank you, Pardis. I wonder if everybody recognizes that when a country goes to war and takes prisoners, those people are prisoners of war, and they have rights and they have protections through international law. These 779 men never had that. They were never prisoners of war. They were called enemy combatants, some shit that Bush made up, a term that carried no rights. This is the outrage of Guantanamo, among many, that a new category of prisoners was created from which you can't get out. And yet, as Pardis said, this huge fight has been waged and people have gotten out, and we're determined to get the other 35 out and for this to never happen again. It's been very important that activists have been on the front lines fighting for this for so many years, 21 years, especially on this anniversary. I want to call out 3 websites for more information: closeguantanamo.org, worldcan'twait.org, and witnessagainsttorture.org, who has led vigils every year in Washington, D.C., in front of the White House and the Supreme Court. Jeremy Verone is here today to tell us about that. Come on up, Jeremy.
Very good. Thank you, Deb, for taking the lead in organizing this incredibly robust event all these years later. Brief warning, I'm a professor, so this might sound a little professorial, but I promise to keep it short. I offer a somewhat grim rejoinder to Pardise's uncharacteristic optimism, but I'll try to end echoing her hope. So, we gather today to call for the closure of Guantanamo, stupefied that we are still gathering to demand that it's close. The story of our protest today is the persistence of our protest, now for decades. Our presence is grounded in the enduring shame of Guantanamo itself and our stubborn insistence on hope against hope, for the sake, above all, of the men still held there. We will not abandon them. On this grim anniversary, let me reflect on what Guantanamo has been, what it came to represent, and what I think it is now. From its first day of operation, Guantanamo was a place of savage abuse of human beings, demonized by means of false accusations and religious and racial bigotry. Just this morning in The Guardian, Mansour Adaifi recounted that torment. He said, quote, "I arrived in February 2002 at age 19, blindfolded, hooded, shackled, beaten. When soldiers removed my hood, all I saw were cages. I had been tortured. I didn't know how long I would be imprisoned or what would happen to me. I was given a number and became suspended between life and death." Fortunately, many people in this country and all over the world were horrified by what they learned of Guantanamo in the early 2000s. In courtrooms and in the streets, they called out U.S. torture and called for Guantanamo to close. Witness Against Torture formed in 2005 at the height of the War on Terror, when 25 Americans went to Cuba to pray and protest outside the U.S. naval base. Their conscience was called by the extreme threats to life and dignity at the prison. But their action was also based on a strategic assumption that closing Guantanamo was a winnable issue, indeed the low-hanging fruit among the demands of a mass anti-war movement arrayed against a warmongering but faltering president. The lawlessness and immorality were so egregious, the condemnation all over the world was so severe. Surely the courts, public opinion, geopolitical pressure would reel America back from this darkest pocket of the dark side. Thereafter, much of the work was to make the detained men subjects before the law, entitled to due process and able to win their release by challenging their detention. Guantanamo, in short, was assailed as a terrible but reversible excess of the worst of the War on Terror. That campaigning achieved apparent victory when Obama, on day one, promised to close the prison. But he abandoned his own pledge. Courts clawed back hard-won rights, while some in Congress demagogued the issue. Broken laws, broken lives, broken promises was our signature slogan for the Obama era. Only by the tenacious resistance of the detained men and their global advocates was the population of the prison brought down. Surviving Obama's tenure, Guantanamo was now a symbol of feckless capitulation, shameful liberal tolerance of the intolerable, and the enduring power of the national security state to defy or gerrymander the law. Guantanamo, thank God, never quite captured Trump's dark imagination, and his threats to fill the prison anew never materialized. Largely forgotten, Guantanamo was nonetheless a shadowy echo of all things Trump: the demonization of the foreign, dark-skinned other, wanton lawlessness, deliberate cruelty, lies big and small, and the deep assault on purported American values. People of good conscience worked mainly to defend U.S. society institutions from the assaults often visited by the United States on foreign peoples. So what is Guantanamo now, 2 years into another liberal presidency, with the goal of closing it as once again the official policy? As we have heard, a meaningful yet pitiful 5 men have been released, while the remaining men continue to endure petty cruelties at the prison. We know all the alleged reasons, that it's hard to find countries to take the men, that Congress still stands in the way, that the politics remain fraught. We reject all these reasons as excuses. We can imagine other explanations, that bureaucratic inertia has set in. Budgets, careers, appropriations bills, procedures tied to Guantanamo are hard to dislodge. But all this explains far too little. Guantanamo ultimately endures, I think, as the chronic and festering immorality of the American empire, incapable of reckoning with its own cruelties and hypocrisies. Schiff and Raskin and Cheney and even Biden on a good day so eloquently talk about accountability, the sanctity and indivisibility of the rule of law, the need to treat the least and the most of us equally in an effort to save American democracy and the American soul. But their passion for justice drowns somewhere off the coast of Florida, far short of Guantanamo's shores. The demand for democracy and dignity and rights for some mythical conception of us somehow accepts continued misery and disenfranchisement of them, the alleged monsters of a bygone era whose fate is easiest to ignore, even as it may occasionally, on days like this, when it's in the media again, prick the conscience. The U.S. hasn't closed Gitmo. Perhaps it can't close Guantanamo because it cannot or will not, as it currently exists, reckons with the violence, racism, and abuse that has always been part of the American project, like Seth talked about. Closing Guantanamo, we have painfully learned, is about so much more than closing Guantanamo. It has meant confronting the totality of the American empire, its past, its future, and the lies it tells itself, which means that our work is so big and so important, and the reward of even small victories, like the release of the next prisoner from Guantanamo, are so profound. Thank you.
All right, Jeremy, thank you. And thank you to everyone again for all these years of understanding what a critical issue it is. And I love what Jeremy said about confronting all the parts of empire. This is one, but it's a very foundational. If you can go about the world and torture, you can get away with a lot, and we are determined to stop that. We have the Raging Grannies again with another song.
We're going to sing Why Are We Silent about Guantanamo. Everybody come gather. Trudy, take the mic. Hello. Here we go. Why are we silent about Guantanamo? Detention is torture, that we all know. 35 men, we must let them go. Guantanamo must be no more. Guantanamo must be no more. 21 years, torture, brutality, from their loved ones indefinitely. Is there anything left of our humanity? Guantanamo must be no more. Guantanamo must be no more. All right. It's time to be honest. keep Obama's promise. I have repeatedly said I intend to close Guantanamo. November 16, 2008.
For those of you just walking by, we're here because it's the 21st anniversary of the Bush-Cheney regime opening up a prison outside the law in Guantanamo, where they detained almost 800 men. We're here for them and for the 35 who are still held, many of them with no charges, and many of them have been approved to leave, but they're not going anywhere. We're demanding that this all be changed. We, for many years, have been joined by a British journalist named Andy Worthington, who came over every year on this anniversary. But because of the pandemic, this is the third year that he has not been able to be with us, except he's going to be with us by voice just now. His website is closeguantanamo.org. He's behind these posters that go all over the world on social media, so everybody knows how many days Guantanamo's been open. If you haven't had your photo snapped yet, we're putting them on social media under the hashtag #CloseGuantanamo. So let's see if we can hear Andy from over in London right now.
Hello, New York. Hey. London. And I'm sorry that I can't be with you today. I would love to be. It's extremely important that on this particularly sad and shameful day in American contemporary life, January the 11th, that there are people out on the streets of America's cities trying to call their government to account. This is the 21st anniversary of the opening of Guantanamo, the start of the 22nd year of operations of the prison, where the basic situation for the men who've been held there from the beginning is that they are held entirely without any rights as human beings. Everything that they have fought for, which has largely been thwarted, has been in spite of this institutional truth of Guantanamo, that when you were sent there, you had no fundamental rights whatsoever as a human being. For years, these men had to fight to get heard in a court to have habeas corpus rights. There was a brief window of a couple of years when the law actually applied at Guantanamo, and several dozen men had their release ordered by judges and were free. But that golden period was shut down again by right-wing appeals court judges in 2010, 2011. The law hasn't applied at Guantanamo ever since. You are only ever able to get out of Guantanamo at the whim of the president or of the US Congress. There is no legal power to get out of Guantanamo. And 35 men are still held at Guantanamo, and 20 of those men have been approved for release. But they've been approved for release by an administrative review process which has no legal weight. So what this means is that there is nothing that can oblige the administration, the Biden administration, to release these men with any kind of haste, because there is no legal power that can be used. And so, as has so often been the case with Guantanamo, it's easier for the president to sit on his hands and not really do anything than it is to be bold and brave and take the appropriate action, therefore enrage Republicans. And that is to free these men. Most of these 20 men have been approved for release since President Biden took office. One was approved for release miraculously under Donald Trump. And 3 other men are languishing there, having been approved for release under Obama back in 2010. That's obviously a whole shameful little mini story in and of itself. But these 20 men are waiting to be free. And like I say, there is no legal compunction for the administration to do anything. So we need to shame the administration into doing something. You can do that by shouting and by holding up the banners that you have today and the placards, by writing, by publicizing it, by talking to everyone. We need to do what we can to try and push the Biden administration to release these men, because it's absolutely unforgivable that a government says to you, after years and years of being held without charge or trial, we no longer want to hold you. You are now free to go, and then doesn't actually release you. So that needs resolving. And the other thing, of course, is that when these men are finally freed, we're looking at a prison that holds less than 15 people, where it still costs $500 million a year to keep that prison running. So a present is nearly $15 million a year for every man that's held for Guantanamo. Each of these 20 men are free for release. But if they are all freed from there, then the number of people at Guantanamo is so small that I would say that the actual closure of the prison starts to look imaginable. And that's where we need to be. So thank you everyone for turning out. I'm sorry I can't be with you today, but I send all my encouragement to you all.
All right, this is truly an international message. It's an international movement, and we're doing this for humanity as well as for those men who have been unjustly held. And as many of the groups today have brought in, this includes people in Rikers Island. This includes people across not only this country, but people who have suffered under the wars created by the United States and its allies. We're going to close out with a song from the Grannies called Guantanamo, Shut It Down, joined by some extra musical friends.
Guantanamo, let's shut it down, shut it down, shut it down now. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. No charges, no trials, brutal and vile. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. Guantanamo, let's shut it down now. Shut it down. Shut it down. Guantanamo, let's shut it down. Let's free the 35. Stop destroying lives. Guantanamo, let's shut it down.
It's a song of hope. On a Monday, give me the gift of love. On Tuesday, give me grace from above. On Wednesday, tell me to have more faith. On Thursday, give me a little more grace. On Friday, get down on my knees and pray. On Saturday, tell me what to say. On Sunday, give me the power divine, just to let my little light shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, and all the time. Down in Guantanamo, we're gonna make it shine. Down in Guantanamo, we're gonna make it shine. Down in Guantanamo, we're gonna make it shine. Make it shine all the time. For our brothers and sisters place in Washington, down in Washington. We're gonna let it shine, down in Washington. We're gonna let it shine, down in Washington. We're gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine all the time. The light that shines is the light of love, hides the darkness from above. Shines on me and it shines on you. Show you what the power of love can do. Shine your light far and near. Shine your light bright and clear. In every dark corner that I find, I'm gonna make my little light shine. Everybody, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. For my friend Anthony, with the group down in Cuba, down in Cuba, they're gonna let it shine. All those down in Cuba, we're gonna let it shine. Always down in Cuba, we're gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. One more time. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine all the time.
How are you?
Thank you.
So somebody walked up to me and she's like, "Do you know about the Catholic Church?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "I gave them $200